The last sentence error that is discussed in this module is a comma splice. The comma splice happens when the writer used only a comma to separate two independent clauses. Remember when we talked about run-ons, we said, you really have to have not just the comma, but a fanboys. Not every misused comma is a comma splice. The comma splice only occurs where two independent clauses come together. Example, I had to work late yesterday. I was still on time to class. Two independent clauses. I had to work late yesterday. I was still on time to class. Comma cannot combine those. I think just to remind you that, I'm going to put an X by that. See, that is not the way to do it. Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed. He tutors them outside of class. Again, you've got two independent clauses. This is incorrect. You can correct comma splices using the same alternatives you use to correct run-ons. The first method, separate the independent clauses with a period and capitalize the word following the period. I had to work late yesterday, period. I was still on time to class. Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed, period. He tutors them outside class. The period brings the reader to a full stop at the end of the first independent clause. This strong traffic signal will keep the clauses from being spliced together. Second method, connect the independent clauses with a comma followed by a coordinating conjunction. This forms a compound sentence. Again, you just saw this method. You should be familiar with it. Independent clause, comma, fanboys, independent clause. I had to work late yesterday. I was still on time to class. Run on. If we put a comma here, it would still be wrong. That's a comma splice. But if you wrote, I had to work late yesterday, but I was still on time to class, that would be correct. Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed. He tutors them outside class. This is incorrect. That's a run-on. If you put the comma in, it's still incorrect. It's a comma splice. Same pattern. You have to add the coordinating conjunction, fanboy. Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed, comma, so he tutors them outside class. Method 3, connect the independent clauses with a semicolon, compound sentence, and I hope that you have not forgotten, because I've said it so many times, I'm sure you haven't, that a semicolon is equal to a period. In the first set of sentences, it is incorrect. If you put the comma there, this is a comma splice, which will likely be marked like this on your papers by your English teacher. I had to work late yesterday. I was still on time to class. When you add the semicolon, it is correct. Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed. He tutors them outside class. This is a comma splice. Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed, semicolon. He tutors them outside of class. This is correct. You can also connect the independent clauses with a semicolon followed by a conjunctive adverb to form a compound sentence. I had to work late yesterday. I was still on time to class. That's a run-on. Put the comma there. It's a comma splice. I had to work late yesterday. However, semicolon, however, I was still on time to class. That is a correct sentence formation. Mr. Harden wants the students to succeed. He tutors them outside class. If you put the comma there, this would be marked as a comma splice by your instructor. Correction. Mr. Harden wants the students to succeed, semicolon, consequently, comma, he tutors them outside class. You can use the semicolon alone, or you can follow it by the word consequently, followed by a comma for emphasis. Method 5, you're going to change one independent clause to a dependent clause by using a subordinating conjunction and forming a complex sentence. This is the pattern: subordinating conjunction followed by a dependent clause, followed by the comma, then the independent clause. Even though I had to work late yesterday, comma, I was still on time to class. Even though I had to work late yesterday, comma, I was still on time to class. I don't know why that's there again. I'm hearing echo in here. So I'm going to take that one out because we already have one example. Because Mr. Harden wants his students to succeed, he tutors them outside of class. apologize for the confusion here with these showing up twice. On your notes, you might just want to mark out that second one so it doesn't confuse you. Remember then to insert a comma between the two clauses if the dependent clause comes first. We've talked about that before, but it's so important. Here it is again. This should be review for you at this point. No comma is needed if the dependent clause follows the independent clause. Independent clause, subordinate conjunction, dependent clause. Okay, at this point I'm going to move on to the exercise, and we're going to write a comma splice in the blank if the sentence is a comma splice, or see if the sentence is correct. On your own, you're going to use any of the methods to correct the comma splices, and try to use each method at least once. Last year on a scorching August afternoon, I witnessed the incredible corn dance at the Santo Domingo Pueblo in New Mexico. Well, here's the comma. You can only have a comma splice if there's a comma in the sentence. Here it is, but the question is it coming between two independent clauses? Last year on a scorching August afternoon. That's not an independent clause. This is correct. Every August 4th, the Pueblo celebrates the feast day of St. Dominic. Well, there's a comma. He founded the Dominican Order of Catholic Friars. You've got a subject and verb on this side forming an independent clause. You've got a subject and verb on this side forming an independent clause. The best thing I think here is to do is use your period option and a capital H. So this is a comma splice. I was excited. This was my first trip to the Santo Domingo Pueblo. There's a comma. We may have a comma splice, do we? Let's check on either side. I was excited. Sentence, yes. This was my first trip to the Santo Domingo Pueblo. Yes. I think I want to join these with a subordinated conjunction because. And I will not need that comma. I can take that out. And the reason I don't is because I'm going to have the independent clause first. I was excited, followed by the dependent clause because this was my first trip to the Santo Domingo Pueblo. This is a comma splice we have now corrected. I reached the plaza late in the morning. The crowd filled every street of the Pueblo. I reached the plaza late in the morning, comma splice. What needs to follow there? That comma is an and. Because it's a fanboys, you need the comma. And the crowd filled every street of the Pueblo. Began as a comma splice. We have now corrected that. I could not believe my eyes. Nearly 500 dancers filled the plaza. Great place for a semicolon to correct the comma splice. Semicolon equals a period. Could a period be used there? I could not believe my eyes. Sentence. Nearly 500 dancers filled the plaza. Sentence. Period could be used there. So could a semicolon. It's your choice. The brightly costumed dances were of all ages, ranging from small children to the elderly. There's only one verb. Were. There's only one subject. Dances. What you have here is a correct sentence. The sun's heat did not disturb the dancers' concentration. They danced in perfect unison. Again, really good place for a semicolon or a period. You clearly have a comma splice occurring at this point. We're going to correct it by changing the comma into a semicolon. The dancers lifted their right legs together, then they pounded the earth. I'm hoping that you're recognizing that then as a four-letter word can't be a fanboys because no fanboys is over 3 letters. Because it's not a fanboys, you're going to have a semicolon here. Or if you prefer, you can use a period and a capital T. Again, comma splice. Well, we've just used 2 semicolons, so I think in this next one, if it's a comma splice, we probably better use a period so we don't get too repetitive. Their movements were as quick as lightning. The noise was like thunder. Period here, capital T. It's a comma splice we have corrected. Suddenly the drummers changed the beat. The dancer shifted rhythm. There's the semicolon. We check on either side. Drummers change the beat. Changed is the verb. Drummers is the subject. The dancer shifted rhythm. Shifted is the verb. Dancers is the subject. We have a correct sentence. Then the drumming paused and the dancer stopped. Look at that beautiful coordinating conjunction sitting right there. We know it's correct. Once again, the drummers began their insistent beating. The dancers started to move. Once again, I'm going to put the dependent clause first this time. When the drummers began their insistent beating, the dancers started to move. We have a dependent clause first, a comma, followed by the independent clause. This is one of the methods that we can use, and we have corrected this comma splice. As they moved around the plaza, the dancers formed a snake-like line. Let's look at this comma. Do we have a comma splice? As they moved around the plaza. Is that independent? It is not. What you have here is a dependent clause connected to an independent clause, and we know that that is a correct move. So this is the comma splice that we have. That is not a comma splice. Let me see if I can correct that. That is, in fact, a correct sentence. As it is, we don't have to do anything to it. Sometimes the line broke into overlapping lines. The dancers still moved in unison. What you have here is a comma splice. It's occurring at this point with a comma, and great place to use a semicolon. Their knees would bend and their bodies would lean toward the ground. I hope you're picturing this as we read through these sentences. Here they are dancing away, comma, and joining together, keeping the action flowing. That is a correct sentence. As they danced, the stamping of their feet never stopped. As they danced, the stamping of their feet never stopped. We have a dependent clause coming first, a comma, followed by an independent clause. This is a correct sentence. Thank you for following along with me as we looked at many different types, 3 different types of sentence errors that can occur in your writing. This is the end of Module 3. Module 4 will be moving into subject-verb agreement. Thank you for your attention.